Can you beat Armored Core for answer by only using melee weapons? Armored Core is a game with all sorts of builds you can create, with tons of weapons at your disposal. You can have machine guns, shoulder rockets, railguns, and even guns for arms. But what if we ignored everything given to us and only used melee weapons? Well, today, I'm here to answer that question. Melee weapons are usually meant as a secondary or even last resort option to use in combat, so it's safe to say that this is going to be a difficult challenge. Getting up close to fast enemies and just not having the option of staying back to shoot with the guns proves to be super difficult. But with that being said, let's jump right into the tutorial and go over some ground rules. The first rule, which is the name of the challenge, is that we can only use melee weapons as our form of damage. This does, however, let us still use things like radars, flares, or any other support item. Next up, I cannot accept help from any allies. In some cases, you can bring along another next with you to help out on the mission, so I'm not allowed to do that. However, some missions force you to have an ally, so there's nothing we can do about that. And that's actually all there is. So without further ado, let's select our starter next. Between our four choices, I select the Independent Mercenary. It's built for close range combat, and for the extra challenge, think of this as the Deprived class from Dark Souls, as it's very poorly equipped. Now, just as a disclaimer, for this video, I'm not going to be including much of the story, so if you're here for that, sorry. Before we jump into our first mission, I of course have to get my mech ready for the challenge, so I slap on both of my starter blades, and get to work. Let's start with attack on line arc. This mission is super easy. All we do is cut a few guys here, and deal with some more back here. Nothing special. And with the completion of that mission, that brings us 3 new missions to select from. The first mission I choose is Attack on Naval Port of Mimir, which shows us them one of many problems with melee weapons. This mission tasks us with destroying all of the boats you see here, which seems simple enough at first. However, these boats explode, and explosions hurt. Between avoiding gunfire and taking damage every time we destroy a boat, this mission just isn't viable to do. This effectively locks the first chapter to only being able to select between 2 missions. So with this new knowledge in mind, let's try to try something easier, like defeating a stationary arms fort. All we have to do here is dodge these initial bullets, and then slice the target a few times. It's actually really easy. Mission complete. Now, there are a lot of missions, and if I were to cover every single one, this video would be super long. So I'm only going to cover the main missions and the ones that gave me trouble. So after clearing the way for a convoy, we get to buy our first piece of equipment, radars. Radars let us detect enemies at a further range and boost the refresh rate of detecting them. It's not super useful for this run, but it's nice to have. This next mission is where it gets interesting. We get to fight our first next, which is what we're piloting. The only difference is they get the luxury of having ranged weapons. This also introduces us into bringing in another next to assist us. But as per the rules, we won't be taking anybody.
Commence mission. Eliminate the target next wonderful body.
We got lucky in this mission, as our target ended up getting cornered, so with our high damage blades, we were able to make quick work of him with a few swings.
Confirmed. Wonderful body has been destroyed. Mission complete.
With our target down, that brings us to a somewhat difficult mission. The first part is easy. Simply just take out the buildings underneath these guns, and they're destroyed.
Special edition normal detected. It's equipped with a frontal shield. Don't waste ordnance on that shield. Arms fort gigabase.
The somewhat difficult part of this is the boats. If you remember, boats explode and deal massive damage to us. However, there's very little, so with our cards played right, we can manage to survive. After that, we just take a few swings at the arms fort and claim victory.
Confirmed. All targets destroyed. Mission complete.
Unfortunately, this next mission isn't so easy. We're paired up against flying enemies, which blades don't deal very well with.
Eliminate the Liliana insurgents.
It's simple at first, with most of the enemies being on the ground.
Normals. No match for a next. You should have little problem taking them out.
Then we get to deal with the 3 flying enemies. Usually, this is super easy, as a few bullets takes them down, but we're just stuck with our metallic fists. Eventually, with enough perseverance, I managed to take down the enemies and barely claim victory. Now we get to face the final mission of Chapter 1, taking down a massive arms fort, the Spirit of Motherwill. It's the same thing as before at first, just dodge the oncoming fire while we slowly make our way closer. Once we're close enough, we have to destroy all the missile launchers on Motherwill before it goes down.
You're in. Remember the briefing. Take out those cannons.
All we have to do is destroy these triangle looking things before Motherwill finally goes down.
It looks like it's working.
Once we finish up, Motherwill is finally defeated. And with that completed, that finally brings us to Chapter 2, where I use all of the parts I've unlocked so far to upgrade my armored core. After finishing my upgrades, it was time to defeat an unknown next. This actually ended up being fairly easy, as we had allied walkers to deal damage for us.
Doomed to obscurity forever. What I deserve for not taking this more seriously.
Confirmed. Unidentified next destroyed.
After having completed that mission, I decided to look at some more parts that were unlocked in the store. This is where I'd find the blades I'd use for the rest of the run. They do slightly less damage, but have more than triple the range, which is necessary for this challenge. The next mission is a bit tricky. We're tasked with destroying 2 arms forts as well as a bunch of scattered around normals.
Displayed on your radar. Enemy units crossing that line will have a firing solution on the transport.
After destroying the initial front line, it was time to move on to the arms forts, which go down with a few swings. This is one of the benefits of blades.
Another arms fort down. One more. Enemy arms fort down. Just marked
After
up.
destroying the last arms fort, all that was left to do was to mop up the pesky normals.
Confirmed.
There we go.
All enemy arms fort units have been destroyed. Mission is successful. The transports are safe. Good work.
The next mission I do is just me running around some tunnels destroying some cannons, so we'll skip over this one. Our next 2 missions are either destroying a power plant or dealing with Port Mimir again. You know, the one with exploding boats. I think you can guess which one I settle for this time. This mission took me a few tries. I had to destroy all the enemies as well as the power plants, which also happened to explode in my face. God, why did everything have to explode? Now, the difficult part of this was actually the enemies. They're super jumpy, so they're hard to hit, and if they land a melee hit on me, it deals massive damage. But eventually, I managed to pull through.
Mission complete.
Next up, defeating another arms fort. But this one isn't going to be so easy, as this one moves really fast.
Destroy the arms fort.
Between having to dodge constant missile fire and only being able to hit him a few times, this mission was the first one that ended up being super tough. But eventually, I managed to land on him and get some super fatal hits in.
Confirmed. Stigro has been destroyed.
There it is.
Mission complete.
Now for this
You're a
next
real
mission,
pro now.
well, I'll let my reaction tell you everything. Oh no. Oh no. The final mission of Chapter 2 has us defeating White Glint, a super mobile and super deadly enemy next. This is one of the hardest missions to do with melee only. Now, before I attempted this mission, I wanted to finish all the duels first, which is the mission you see at the bottom. Dan Morrow is the name of someone I can duel. I'm not going to be showing any of these, as it's just the same thing over and over, trying to fight nexts for 2 hours. All this does for me is unlock a few parts I might find useful later, but mostly this didn't do much for me. Now, 2 hours later, it was finally time to attempt to defeat White Glint. Something those duels did do for me was let me know the weaknesses of my build, so after completely changing my entire next, I was ready.
This is the operator of White Glint. You are trespassing in line art territory. Pull back immediately, or we will respond with lethal force.
This mission would be the most difficult one yet. We are forced to have an ally for this fight, but there's a twist.
This battle is for rank 1. You can't go any higher. Show me what you can do.
White Glint also has assault armor, or in other words, a giant explosion which he uses if I get too close. I have to be careful or else this can instantly kill me. Now, remember that twist I mentioned with our ally? Yeah, once White Glint gets to around half health, our ally runs away, so we're left on our own.
Damn it, I'm taking on water. No, I can't go down here. Not now.
Is he sinking into the ocean? Just like that? Unbelievable. Looks like it's one-on-one.
But after countless deaths, White Glint attempts to fight me on a bridge, which is where I dash in for the final blow.
Confirmed. White Glint has been destroyed. Mission complete.
Now with White Glint defeated, it was time to move on to Chapter 3, where I'd start off fighting 2 enemy nexts at the same time. This mission was surprisingly easy, with the first next going down in 2 hits, that just left me in a one-on-one situation. The last next is super nimble, but with my quick dashes, I'm able to slowly chip away health right before I end up going down.
You. What kind of joke is this? Red rum. Please.
The next mission is just killing more boats, which I have an arms for as an ally, so we'll just skip over this one. The next mission has us defeating an arms fort, but with flying cannons.
Careful.
This ends up being super easy, as I can dash quickly and destroy the cannons in just a few hits.
Just one left. Confirmed. All targets destroyed. Mission complete.
Now for the final mission of Chapter 3, where an ally and I have to defeat an enemy next. Very similar to White Glint, except this time it's harder, but at least our ally actually stays with us during the fight. This next is super nimble, but with an open arena to fight in, I have plenty of opportunities to dash in and chip away health. You know, I'm not actually sure if my ally did more damage than me, but after a long battle, I managed to land the killing blow over the water.
Careless one. Forgive me. I gave you everything I had.
Now, with our foe defeated and a short Chapter 3 completed, it was time to move on to the 4th and final chapter. This chapter is completely linear, only giving us one mission to select from each time. So with that said, it's time to destroy some enemy arms forts. This mission is super easy. All we do is fly into the arms fort's weak spots, and a couple swings destroys them. We do this a few more times, and the mission is completed.
Arms fort units have been destroyed. Mission complete. Nothing phases you, does it? Hats off.
With the arms forts destroyed, it was time to move on to the second to last mission, which is just a 2v2 next fight.
Commence mission. Eliminate the Orca Brigade.
Our first target is a slow and heavy next, which paired up against my blades doesn't stand a chance. All it takes is a few well-placed swings, which brings us down to one target left. Our last target is a tank build, which means they are super slow but with lots of health. Unfortunately for them, this lets me get in some high damage hits very quickly.
So this is the end of the line? I have no regrets. Thanks for the fun times, Mulsel.
Confirmed. Enemy next destroyed. Mission complete. Looks like mission.
But now, it's time to end it all, in the defense of Arteria Cranium.
The Cranium's core is just up ahead.
The final mission has us, once again, paired up with the Wind D Fanchon, a forced ally, up against two of the strongest necks we've ever faced. One of the enemy nexts, similarly to me, has a very strong melee build, so I try to target him first. With extra boost on my shoulders and my back, I'm able to dash super fast and make quick work of him.
Enemy next destroyed.
This just leaves us, once again, in a 2v1 situation, not leaving the enemy a chance. Even though this is one of the most nimble opponents I've faced, with the help of my ally, he eventually goes down.
Is this really my fate? To lose everything? Prepare your soul. These cowardly ideals, they will cause the downfall of humanity.
And so, that answers the question that nobody asked. Can you beat Armored Core 4 Answer with only melee weapons? Yes. Yes you can. With the right build and enough mental endurance, melee weapons can actually be pretty fun.
Among the clouds.
And with that being said, thank you all for watching and sticking to the very end.